Welcome to The More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. From the right side of the political spectrum, we have
DJ McGuire, a progressive conservative from Suffolk, Virginia.
And from the left side, we have
Greg Matuzak, a common-sense liberal, not from Covington Catholic High School, but is from Cincinnati, Ohio. A lot of heat from here lately.
And I am Rebecca Kushmiter, a progressive feminist from very windy Kensington, Maryland. My house might blow down while we're recording this, guys.
Just as long as it lands on a witch, we're okay.
Yeah, that's what I'll aim for.
And I'm Kevin Kelton, a passionate, moderate Democrat from Los Angeles, California. And we want to remind our listeners to please look for the moreperfectunionpodcast.com website, where you can find articles that we write and bios about us. Rebecca, you posted a new Pop Goes the Political Culture column this week. You want to tell everybody what you covered?
Yeah, I was talking about Cardi B and her awesome little Instagram video that is getting so much buzz. We couldn't get her as a guest tonight. Weird.
She's awesome. She's awesome.
And she was awesome. She was great.
I love your article, by the way.
Thank you.
What's the phrase she used? With Tommy Lauren, she would...
Oh, she would dog walk her?
She would dog walk her.
And then Cardi B talked about paying $4 million in taxes, and Tommy Laren's like, yeah, that's a liberal thing that you have to pay taxes. And everyone's like, Tommy, she's not complaining. She's bragging, Tommy. Bragging.
Because she makes stacks upon stacks.
Oh, stacks upon stacks, baby.
And I posted an article this week about Kirsten Gillibrand and her newfound campaign for the presidency and where I think she might have tripped herself up before she got started, but we'll also get to her a little bit later. So we wanted to start tonight with the latest, most important news from Washington, which is that President Trump made a new offer to Democrats to try to end the shutdown. And Democrats actually rejected it before the words came out of his mouth. And I don't blame them. Guys, do you think that was a serious offer, or was it just public posturing?
Yeah, I said Trump's offer was he gets his wall, and in exchange, he gets hostages.
Yeah.
A strange offer.
Yeah, he wants to trade his $5.7 billion wall, which will, of course, live 100 or more years. He wants to trade that for a DACA fix that only covers them for 3 years, which is just ludicrous. Why he wouldn't just offer a permanent DACA fix? Well, I know why, because he would have gotten killed from the right wing of his party if he did it, but it makes no sense in terms of a negotiation.
And it says something about where Trump's head is, that the first response to this, the first challenge, or the only challenge he's really refuted, is not from Democrats who have said, no, this is ridiculous, it's not acceptable, it's not a good deal, but from Ann Coulter, who called it amnesty and said, we voted for Trump, but we got Jeb. Trump responded to her pretty quickly and said, no, it's not amnesty, it's blah, 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 blah. But he really didn't do anything to try to convince Democrats to agree to the offer. He's, again, more worried about what Ann Coulter would say than about what Democrats would say at this point.
But, you know, the funny thing about that amnesty tweet that Donald put in, because he's such a bad negotiator, the actual tweet goes, no, amnesty is not part of my offer. It's a 3-year extension of DACA. Amnesty will be used only on a much bigger deal, you know, because what? I guess... Yeah, wait, it goes on. And whether on immigration or something. Likewise, there will be no big push to remove the 11 million plus people who are here illegally.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why he's a bad negotiator. First of all, he's negotiating on both sides. He's negotiating with Democrats, but he's also negotiating with Ann Coulter and with Rush Limbaugh and with Sean Hannity.
Right.
And they're on the other side. And he's badly caught in the middle because he's trying to convince Democrats to go for something that he thinks they'll think is amnesty or a DACA fix. And then he's turning around and publicly telling the people on his side, no, that's not really what this is at all. Believe me, it's not amnesty. I'm just fooling them. So he is, as you said, Greg, he is a horrible negotiator. But here's another thing I've been thinking about Trump and his negotiating skills. I think I get Donald Trump. I think I really see into his mind. Donald Trump thinks...
What do you see in there, Kevin? That's a...
Oh my gosh, the years of therapy you will have to endure.
Paint us a picture of the inside of Trump's mind, Kevin.
All of us go to the car dealer whenever we have to buy a new or used car, and we think, well, we're going to negotiate hard because we can just walk away from this particular dealership and go to another Lexus dealership or another Honda or Toyota dealership, and I'll keep doing that until I get the deal I want on the car I want. And it works when you're buying a car. And Donald Trump thinks all negotiations are like that you can lowball the other side and eventually you will bully them into accepting your offer. The problem here is that what he doesn't realize is Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are the only deal in town for him. There's no other bank to go to. There's no other property to buy to build his mega tower. There's no other vendor that he can go and screw out of whatever. He has one side, essentially one person, although it's two individuals, but one entity that he can negotiate with here, and he cannot bully them. So, as you know, I've predicted all along that Donald Trump is going to get something because I just don't see how he can fold his hand politically. But he is in a really bad position.
Well, Kevin, I actually thought this was the weekend that you were going to be right, and I was going to have to, admit to that.
It's not as painful as you think it is, Rebecca.
I'll just lie back and think of England. Is that when I heard he was going to put forth something with DACA protections before I knew what it was, I was thinking, okay, this is the moment that Nancy is going to turn around and say, all right, I'll offer you a lower dollar figure for your wall, but I want more robust protections on DACA. When it turned out it was something called the Bridge Act that Democrats have already rejected out of hand and, it doesn't extend protections much past what the Supreme Court has already allowed them. That's when Pelosi sat back and just said no. But I actually thought that we would start to see some movement this weekend, until Trump tried to take hostages as well as build a wall, as DJ put it.
Okay, so as I like to say, we've eaten our veggies, we've been good boys and girls, we've done our homework. Now we can stay up late and talk about the 2020 primaries and gossip all about who likes who and who doesn't like who. And
slumber parties at Kevin's house are the coolest. We eat pizza and talk primaries.
Last week, Kirsten Gillibrand entered the Democratic primaries, and she is, I think, the fourth or fifth woman? No, I think the fourth woman to announce.
Fourth.
For some reason, the guys are a little slow getting in there, but we'll talk about them. But also interesting is who may be in on the GOP side and who is definitely not going to be in on the GOP side. Who wants to feel those little rumor gossips?
Well, let's go geographically. You take yours and I'll take mine.
I'll go first. All right. So rumor has it that Larry Hogan, my illustrious governor, who I call Donald Trump Light, would like to jump into the GOP primary. I am not certain this is actually true. It may be that someone at a dinner party somewhere said, hey, you know who could jump in the GOP primary? Larry Hogan. Because you have to think of every vaguely affable Republican in the country.
And remind people who he is and why he is such an interesting choice.
Well, I mean, he's a second-term governor of Maryland. He's won blue Maryland, or allegedly blue Maryland, twice. He is also a commercial real estate guy, weirdly, who loves charter schools and wants to keep building crap. Only he wants to build roads that you have to pay to drive on. And there's nothing wrong with him. From a policy standpoint, I agree. I disagree with a lot of his policies, as I do with most Republicans. But there's nothing wrong with him. He doesn't have any personal flaws. He's not a horrible person. He doesn't grope women in public. He doesn't have affairs with adult film actresses. He's just kind of a nice guy who really hates taxes. He also lacks the charisma to really stage a run against Donald Trump. He certainly lacks the name recognition. And frankly, I don't think he has the appetite for it.
Okay. Now, on the other side of the political GOP spectrum is my asshole governor from the wonderful state of Ohio, John Kasich.
Ex-governor. Ex.
Right. X. Oh yeah, X. For it's only been a month, so I'm still.
Yeah.
We have a different asshole governor now. But Kasich, everyone's been like, so what are you doing? Are you running for president? And he's the guy who like, you know, they're like, well, we hate Donald Trump. He's terrible. So you're the guy because you're this, gee golly shucks, and you're wonderful, and you're the one who you're so bipartisan. And you took in Medicaid expansion because you said that's the Christian thing to do, and you're so wonderful, you're like a moderate, and you've always rallied against Trump, and he has. And there's a lot of respect for him in that aspect, so he'd be great. But he has said, you know what? I think I'm going to go for, once again, my other term, stacks on stacks, and become a CNN senior political commentator. And there's one thing that Republicans hate more than, well, anything, it's CNN. So he's out.
Maybe they're going to love CNN now. Maybe John Kasich is going to make CNN the Fox News for the not Trump crowd.
Like Claire McCaskill is going to make MSNBC less liberal.
Less liberal, right?
Yeah, that'll happen. I want to circle back to Larry Hogan, because you know why I'd like to see him run? So that we could do an episode called Hero Hogan. Oh. And I could put him in the Bob Crane, little American hat.
Oh my God! You're going to put him in a helmet.
As Klink, I would have Donald Trump's face, and as Schultz, I would have Mike Pence. And that's
oh my gosh, because he knows nothing. He knows nothing.
Oh my God.
So now let's take a moment to go back and talk about the Democrats, but I wanted to segue to it. Rebecca, something you said about Larry Hogan, which is there's nothing wrong with him, that it's just his politics. And I want to use that to segue to a thought I had this week about the Democrats. Now, we've spoken last week about Kirsten Gillibrand and some of the, what some of us still think is a lingering controversy around what happened with Al Franken, but we won't go into detail on that here. We've spoken about that a lot in the past. But Gillibrand has also taken some shots this week for having really morphed her political philosophies and her political stances after she went from being a congresswoman to being a conservative Democrat elected to the Senate in New York from upstate New York. Apparently, at one point, she had an A rating from the NRA. She was
she had some very pro-deportation stances on her 2008 campaign page. Jake Tapper called her out on it this morning. And she talks about this very candidly and has been for a while. She was from a rural upstate district, and her vision of representation was colored by who her constituents were. When she was appointed and then ran for the Senate, she had to expand her constituency. And, she talks about having to change her understanding that what guns are used for in upstate New York is different than what guns are used for in Brooklyn.
Okay, but my point was not so much to dissect her personally, but if you go down the role of pretty much everyone that's running on the Democratic side, and this is really true of all politicians, if you look at Kamala Harris, she has some problems with some of the stances that she took as a prosecutor. Mm-hmm. She called herself a progressive prosecutor when she was a attorney general of the state of California. But she prosecuted some cases where there were innocent people that her prosecuting office kept exculpatory evidence from the defense side, and people got convicted who should not have been convicted. And she also was very pro-death penalty. Now, that's just her. Now let's look at Joe Biden. Everybody knows that Joe Biden has a lot of lingering controversy from the Clarence Thomas hearings. And there's also a question about some of his stances on the banking issue relative to him being the senator from Visa or whatever it was.
Yeah, Delaware, because Delaware's a big banking state.
And then you could go down the list. I mean, Bernie Sanders now is having some issues about alleged sexual harassment in his campaign in 2016. Cory Booker has a lot of things that are not going to sit very well with the Democratic base.
Merck.
Mm-hmm.
And so my point is, we have to get away from looking for this pure candidate who no one can attack, because they don't exist. And you know what really struck me today? I was thinking about it. All of these people have some pretty serious things that they have to either apologize for, retract, or pretend, or just pray that they don't get hit too hard at them. Tulsi Gabbard, with her comments when she was 19 or 20 about gays and about conversion therapy that are now antithetical to the Democratic Party. And she did a 4-minute mea culpa video this week, basically saying, what did I know? I was such a young kid. She's 37 now. I mean, she's not that old now. But she said, what did I know back then? I was a young kid. I was being supportive of my dad. I totally disavow those statements. I never really believed that. And so you look down the list. Everyone has a real problem. And then you get to Elizabeth Warren. And what is the only knock on her? That she did a DNA test and went public with the results. And when you think about it, she has taken such friendly fire, and of course from conservatives as well, for something that has nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with her positions. DJ, I know that you're not crazy about her trade policy, but for the Democratic Party, she really aligns issue for issue for issue with, 80 to 85% of the Democratic Party. Yet somehow she has become this pariah for something that has nothing to do with politics. And I don't understand that at all.
No candidate is perfect. This is true. This is one of the reasons why you have primaries and nominating contests in the first place, to see how well candidates can react when they are dealing with controversy, dealing with issues that they'd rather avoid, these kinds of things. That's why you have these. However, and Kevin, you did a great job of listing some of the problems that those candidates will deal with. Naturally, you skipped my candidate, Congressman Delaney, who will have his problem, who is openly a moderate, and he openly calls himself a centrist, and that's going, people are going to ask him about that, and rightly so, and he will address that. In regards to Elizabeth Warren, it is not that she chose to take the DNA test. It is the fact that, frankly, her political instincts are not particularly good.
Well, no. You're going to something else, DJ. We've talked about it before, and this is not about the fact that she didn't win Massachusetts by a big enough margin, political instincts. It's about people are knocking her on something that has nothing to do with her politics.
But the context in which you presented your comments were, the only reason people are upset about Elizabeth Warren is because of the DNA test. And I'm telling you, that's just not so. Elizabeth Warren has been criticized for her views on Syria, which are far too dovish for my taste and dovish for a lot of people. People have criticized her on trade. People have looked at her record as a political candidate and said, that leaves some problems. It's not just the DNA test. That's not the only issue that has gotten her in trouble and that has gotten her criticism. There are certain things that Democrats will want in their nominee, and they're going to look for them among all of those candidates. It may very well be that they decide, you know something? The whole DNA thing is not really enough to disqualify Elizabeth Warren. Okay, that's going to be their call. But the idea that Elizabeth Warren is somehow being singled out for her mistakes, or for this mistake, I do not believe that is correct, because one, there are other mistakes that people are or other mistakes or disagreements that people are pushing her on, number one. And number two, again, it is far too early. We don't know exactly where these folks are going to go. And Elizabeth Warren is still considered a top-tier candidate. From what I have seen, the response in Washington is that Elizabeth Warren is a higher-profile candidate than anybody else we have talked about, with the exception of Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. If you're in the top three, you really aren't being pinged that badly for whatever mistakes you may have made.
Can we talk about maybe the giant donkey in the room? maybe the issue, and this can upset some people, maybe not. Maybe the issue is that it's like what I call the ex-girlfriend theory. This starts out funny, but it gets dark real quick.
Great.
Maybe we feel like we just got burned really bad with Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
We did. It got dark. I mean, it was not fun. And maybe the Democratic Party, maybe America, is not ready to start another relationship with an older, white, female candidate at this point. And we are putting all the baggage we had with Hillary Clinton on. And we've talked about this last week. Well, I didn't really like Hillary Clinton because I don't really know why. And now I'm not liking Elizabeth Warren. And why? Well, I don't really, but maybe we still have issues that we should talk about with a licensed therapist about this. But, maybe we're just, and it's ageist, it's sexist, it's bullcrap. But I think a lot of people are feeling like if Hillary couldn't win, and she was Hillary. Have you seen that picture of her with the sunglasses and her in the jet and the phone? How is Elizabeth Warren going to do it? And yeah, so I think there's a lot of that. Go ahead. Tell me.
While you were going through that speech, let's just call it a speech.
Go ahead.
The image that I had in my head is, do you remember from the Roadrunner cartoons or sometimes in a Bugs Bunny cartoon, someone would be out on a limb or out on a wooden plank and someone else would be soaring it off and that person was just out there and about to fall and crash? That's the image that I had of you just now. So we also want to talk today about one of our advertisers who we're welcoming back to the program. It's Blinkist. In today's age, it can be hard to find time to sit down and learn more. It's not always easy when the likes of social media can be so addictive and time-consuming to keep up on your reading. So you may think you don't have time to read a book or to develop yourself. Well, there's now an app that we highly recommend, and it is called Blinkist.
Blinkist is the only app that takes the best key takeaways, all the need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books, and condenses them down into just 15 minutes so you can read or listen to them in the commercial breaks on Mike Huckabee's Comedy Hour.
And I like Blinkist because in that less than 15 minutes, I feel like I can get that information quick. I can use Blinkist when I'm driving or on the treadmill, which is a New Year's resolution, which isn't happening. It works really well and it fits into my lifestyle across the board.
Unless he's doing a sleep study. That's something else. But that's why 8 million people are using Blinkist right now. It has a massive and growing library. We're talking self-help, business, health, history, current events, things like Michelle Obama's revealing autobiography titled Becoming, Simon Sinek's work Start With Why, which asks the questions, why are some people and organizations more innovative, more influential, more profitable than others? Why are so few successful businesses able to repeat their success? Those are the kinds of things you can get from Blinkist right now.
That's right. And so what we want you to do, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for the More Perfect Union audience. Go to Blinkist.com/moreperfectunion to start your free 7-day trial. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/moreperfectunion to start your free 7-day trial. That's Blinkist.com/moreperfectunion.
I want to listen to the More Perfect Union podcast.
No, I want to listen to the More Perfect Union podcast.
No, it's my turn to listen to the More Perfect Union podcast.
No, it's my turn.
The More Perfect Union podcast. Real debate without the hate.
So now we get to the popcorn of the show, which is the BuzzFeed kerfuffle. Or Kafifi, whatever you want to call it, that happened this week.
The BuzzFeed Kafifi. There's a title for this week's episode.
So we're doing this on Sunday. It's about 48 hours after, it's 72 hours after BuzzFeed broke the story that Michael Cohen may have lied under oath at the direction of Donald Trump, and that the Mueller office might have actual evidence apart from Michael Cohen's testimony, actual physical evidence to prove that Donald Trump had directed him to lie under oath. Then, about 24 hours after that, came the rebuttal or the statement from the Mueller office saying that they got some of the facts incorrect in the article. Where are we now, guys? Has this hurt the reputation of the Mueller office? Has this just hurt the media? Has this buttressed the Trump defense? What's your takeaway from this?
It all got swept off the front pages by Rudy, who's my client again? Giuliani today.
Yes.
With the bizarre comments about, did Trump talk to Cohen about his testimony? Yeah, he may have, but so what if he did? And this actually just popped in the New York Times like an hour ago. My apologies to the rest of you.
Please, go ahead.
Is that Giuliani has apparently told the New York Times that Trump told him that he was negotiating on the Trump Tower, quote, from the day I declare to the day I won.
Yeah.
Which would be completely new.
Wait, he said that on TV?
No,
he said it to the New York Times.
Giuliani said it to the New York Times. He said that's what Trump told him.
And actually, he said on TV he was working on it at least until, he said, he was probably working on it until October,
right,
September.
Until October, November. So now,
oh my God,
nobody
Rudy.
cares about BuzzFeed anymore because we now have the president's own lawyer saying that as a candidate for president, his campaign and his party was being briefed about the Russian government's attempt to influence the elections. He was still negotiating with said Russian government about Trump Tower in Moscow.
All right, but let's go back to the BuzzFeed thing for a second. Two things. One, when I first heard this, and every news article, disclaimed like, hey, by the way, the breaking news, we're not reporting it, but BuzzFeed, New York Times, BuzzFeed is reporting this, not us.
And the two words, if true.
Right, if true. Which, let's be clear, I go to BuzzFeed to find out which Disney princess I am. Okay.
Which one are you, Greg?
Wouldn't you like to know?
I like to think you're all of them.
It's Mulan. Because someday they will make a man out of me. So no one was sitting there going, BuzzFeed? How did they get this scoop? BuzzFeed?
No, I actually was. I have to respectfully disagree with you. They are now a good journalistic outfit. They actually have a good reputation in journalism.
All right, no one can see your air quotes when you say that sarcastically.
No, I'm not being sarcastic.
BuzzFeed had the Steele dossier.
No, everyone had the Steele dossier.
Okay, BuzzFeed published the Steele dossier.
Right, and then they got sued for it, which everyone else wanted to get sued for it.
Because here's
and
the
they
thing.
Won.
Well, first of all, we're going on about
them.
15 different tentacles. I'll get back to you, but since you brought it up, the Trump people and Rudy Giuliani are now knocking BuzzFeed because they went public with the discredited Steele dossier. First of all, it has not been discredited.
No,
90% of it has held up to proven facts. Secondly, all they did was take a document that, whether it was real or whether it had problems, was involved in the investigation, and they made it public. So they didn't do anything wrong, even if you don't like the Steele dossier. All they did was publish a document that existed that was definitely a part of this investigation.
Without a doubt.
When people are knocking BuzzFeed as they're not real journalism, that is not true. Ben Smith, who is the executive editor over there, has a solid reputation. This is not a kid. This is not an online journalist. No, he's a solid journalist. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, here's the part that I find a little fishy. And the BuzzFeed puts this out. They say it's based from 2 law enforcement sources. Okay. The Mueller office issues a response that says essentially this is not quite accurate, but there's now that sets the argument. Well, how much is Mueller disputing? And then the Washington Post runs a story that says, I kid you not, that essentially says we're supposed to interpret Mueller's response as a complete denial of everything from BuzzFeed based on, quote, people familiar with the investigation.
Our anonymous sources can beat up your anonymous sources.
Right, exactly. Our anonymous sources can beat up your anonymous sources.
That is a fantastic observation. Yeah. I did not catch that when I read the WAPO article.
So there's that. And as of yesterday, BuzzFeed has doubled down. They say we stand by our reporting. We'd love to hear from the special counsel's office what we got wrong. And then Rudy got on Meet the Press, and apparently nobody cares anymore.
So This BuzzFeed article was so wrong, right, that Mueller and his team had to say, stop, pump on the brakes. You guys are so wrong, which means that you can interpret it that everything else that has been said, okay, that everything about how crappy Trump's been and that all this Russia stuff and all this has been pretty much right.
Yeah, that's an interpretation.
So, yay, BuzzFeed's terrible that they've kind of given this reverse confirmation that we are all on the right track here because BuzzFeed is so terrible on this one story that everything else is right.
That's a great point too, Greg. I think I did not think of that either. By coming out against one article, it implies that most of the reporting has been much more accurate.
Well, what I keep going back to is Ronan Farrow was tweeting about this, and as we all know, he is a legitimate journalist. The Pulitzer Committee has confirmed that. And he said, I can't speak to BuzzFeed's sourcing, but for what it's worth, I declined to run with parts of the narrative they conveyed based on a source central to the story repeatedly disputing the idea that Trump directly issued orders of that kind. Note that the general thrust of Cohen lying to Congress, quote, in accordance with, unquote, or, quote, to support in advance, unquote, Trump's agenda, per Cohen's legal memo, is not in dispute. The source disputed the further, more specific idea that Trump issued and memorialized repeated direct instructions. So what Farrow's source is saying, as I read these two tweets, is that, yes, Cohen lied. Yes, it was at the general behest of Trump, but it wasn't Trump writing a memo saying to Michael Cohen from Donald, lying to Congress, go get him, buddy.
Well, what I think Farrow was saying is that evidence doesn't exist as he knows it. He's not saying it didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. Since the three of you just made good points, I would like to try to join your club. So let me try to make one good point.
It's a high bar.
Come on board, Kevin.
It's a high
bar.
Root
for me here. Root for me. So here's what I think went wrong, and here's what I think the right solution is. I'm not sure that anything actually went wrong. Look, they said 2 high-level law enforcement officers. Clearly, these are probably FBI agents who are on the case because nobody thinks that Mueller's office is leaking this stuff. So 2 FBI agents who I guess have been sources to the BuzzFeed journalists, the 2 guys that wrote this story, went on record about this, went on anonymous background on this particular story. And I think what happened is, look, there's all of this evidence that Mueller has been investigating and that the Southern District of New York has been compiling about what Michael Cohen's role is and has been in the whole Trump-Russia thing. And there's probably mounds of evidence. And you had 2 FBI agents that were trying to distill it down to 1 or 2 sentences that could be used by the reporters in their piece. And I think if there was a mistake made, it's not that they lied or they don't know what's going on. I think in trying to take very complex, shades of gray stuff and condense it down to sound bites, it became more hyper than it should have been. It became more definitive. Donald Trump definitely directed him. Directed is a very specific word. And maybe he didn't direct, maybe he encouraged, maybe he implicitly suggested. So I think that's where the mistake is. But here's Kevin Kelton's solution. And I'm surprised this hasn't happened yet.
Impeach Trump? That's a solution.
Well, that's always my solution. But,
okay.
But I have a step between that here and there, which is, look, BuzzFeed already broke the story. They already got the scoop. They have 2 anonymous sources. What should happen, I think, is they should, with the source's permission, not without their permission, but only with their permission, they should give their names to a reporter at the Washington Post or a reporter at the New York Times and let that reporter have the conversation with those 2 sources and let that reporter either confirm that that is in fact the story that he or she would write, or let that person say, we interpret it a little differently. But if another news source came to the same conclusion, then I think you have a real interesting clash between the special prosecutor's office and people in the Justice Department who are interpreting the evidence differently.
Yeah, you're probably right. During the note taking,
probably.
Wait, listen. You're probably right. This is as close as a good job you're going to get. During the note taking, Ben Smith's crayon probably broke, and all of his notes got smudgy. And then he got crabby. It was time for a nap, and then he just kind of shorthanded it. Because let's face it, Ben Smith's a child, and he should stick to his lane and maybe write, like, which Illuminati character are you? Because, seriously, no.
Greg, you're just mad that the quiz didn't say that you were Ariel.
Oh my gosh, I'd do anything to be an Ariel and be part of your world.
Oh, I mean, what I think is in dispute is whether or not there's a paper trail that can lead directly from Donald Trump to Michael Cohen lying to Congress. And I think someone in the FBI said there is, and Mueller had to pull it back and say it isn't. And Kevin, you sent an article. Now I'm not remembering the details. But, you know, it sounded like there was some Justice Department pushback, you know, telling Mueller he had to respond to it. And it's very ambiguous right now what was wrong about the BuzzFeed reporting and what wasn't. But I think we all know that Michael Cohen lied to Congress because Donald Trump wanted him to, not because Michael Cohen takes a lot of initiative on his own.
Okay, fair enough.
No. And we don't use the words what's wrong with BuzzFeed's reporting. It's what's right with BuzzFeed's reporting. It's a shorter list.
Stop.
I'm on a roll tonight. It's Ben Shapiro.
You really are. You're like, BuzzFeed is going to come after us.
It's Ben
Shapiro. They're going to put
BuzzFeed.
Ben Shapiro ranked above us on their next listicle, and you're going to be sorry, Greg. You're going to be sorry.
Yeah.
The More Perfect Union, available on iTunes and wherever you download your podcasts. And it's so much better than Ben Shapiro's podcast.
And you know what I wanted? What my takeaway is? Here we have the sole female on our program, actually taking everything that the men have said in our very restrictive corners and bringing some common ground to it. And I think the problem with our show, if I may say so, is there's too much toxic masculinity going on here. And you know what? What I think the answer would be, Greg and DJ? You got to shave those beards. You got to shave those beards.
No.
Hey, you guys, you saw the Gillette ad, right? Isn't that the answer to all the world's problems? Men have to shave more?
That does seem to be, or shave more, or maybe shave less. Well, I guess shave more. Because Gillette would like you to buy more razors.
What did you guys think of that Gillette ad?
I thought it was great.
You liked it?
I thought it was great. I talk about that whole boys will be boys excuse is not an excuse. I don't take it when I hear it from parents. I don't take it when I hear it from neighbors when they're kids, when I see kids or boys fighting and they go, well, boys will be boys. No. They're all children. They can act reasonable. They don't need to hit each other. They certainly don't have to hit, my children. No, that's not.
What does it have to do with the Gillette ad?
Well, no, that was the message of the Gillette ad. There was that whole line of guys. Yeah, the whole line of guys standing there going, "Boys will be boys, boys will be boys," and we're trying to break out of that. Like, boys don't have to be like that. And as men, you're allowed to stand up and tell boys, "Hey, knock it off."
What does it have to do with facial hair?
Hard to say.
Hey, when any corporate entity takes responsibility and is willing to put their corporate brand and their name on the line for a moral stance, I stand up and applaud.
Hey, what was that Ben Shapiro kerfuffle that happened this week?
He's an idiot.
Well,
he opened his mouth. He talked about
baby Hitler. He did it.
Yeah, he said you don't go back in time and kill baby Hitler because he's a baby and we don't kill babies. He was at he was at an anti-choice march.
And he lost at least one advertiser because of that.
Two?
Yeah, we're giving him a call right now, actually.
Yeah. Quip, we're here.
And lastly, with Martin Luther King Day, actually we're on the precipice of it, and by the time our listeners are listening to this, it will be Martin Luther King Day. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, excuse me. We should talk a little bit about this Covington to Columbia situation, the protesters.
Yeah.
Greg, take it away. These are your neighbors.
So Covington Catholic High School is a very, very nice high school in Covington, Kentucky. It's literally right across the river like I said, in Covington, Kentucky. It's very expensive. It's an all-male high school, and it's run by the Archdiocese. It's a Catholic school. And this past week, they went to DC for the March for Life, like countless other Catholic high schools. But while they were there, there was a veteran. There was a Native American.
It was an event that had a number of sibling events across the country. It was the Indigenous Peoples March, and it was to raise awareness for the plight of Indigenous peoples the world over, many of whom have been subjected to marginalization, upwards and including genocide.
Yeah. Right. How they got to this point, it's hard to say, because did the man kind of approach them? Did they approach the man? But what it ended up was they ended up making fun, mocking, screaming, build the wall, chanting to this 90-year-old.
He was like 67.
Was he 67?
Yeah, he was young. He looked, he was visibly elderly. He was,
gosh.
He was not a young man, but he was in his 60s or maybe early 70s, but he was not that old. He's old enough to be a Vietnam veteran, but, not.
So these kids surrounded him.
And there is now recent other reporting that said that the kids did not actually shout "Build the Wall," and did not actually shout anything other than various school slogans from their school. So again, reports differ as to what was actually said. There was apparently a third protest group called Black Hebrew Israelites that were allegedly shouting various epithets at the kids themselves. They are not related to the Native American demonstration. They were also there.
Yeah, we have three discrete groups present. We have kids from the March for Life, and they were at the Lincoln Memorial because that was their meetup point before leaving town.
And they were dressed in MAGA outfits.
I'll get to that.
Yeah,
I'll get to that. I'll address that.
I have a theory about that. I think they just picked that stuff up from street vendors in the hour before it happened, because they had just seen the president speak. I think that is incidental. Noteworthy, but incidental.
I don't think it's incidental. I think it's important.
Okay. And then we have the people from the Indigenous Peoples event, and then we have these other guys who were affiliated with some other group. But I don't know that that's even verified. But it sounds like these other guys from the third group started yelling at the white kids who were standing around being obnoxious. And the obnoxiousness started out as kind of normal teen obnoxiousness. Those kids chose to engage with these adults who were taunting them. And according to Elder Phillips, they decided that what they were going to do was they wanted to move out of that area of the mall and start walking towards the Lincoln Memorial. And as they walked towards the Lincoln Memorial between these two other groups that were yelling at each other, that was the point at which the dozens of these kids circled around them, blocked their path, got in their faces, and were sort of taunting and jeering them.
And it could have at any moment gotten really dark and really violent. We're talking about they were just behaving like teens. I personally think this is real poisonous masculinity, toxic masculinity.
Yeah, but they started out sitting on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial chanting school chants, and fine, whatever. That's obnoxious.
Yeah, that's fine.
But they're allowed to be there. But the point at which they started engaging with other groups,
yes,
yelling back and taunting, that's when it became toxic. And they so greatly outnumbered both of these other groups of people that they were effectively a mob fighting a minority, just by sheer numbers, even if you take the racial elements out of it.
And it only needed one little shove for that to become violent. And that man was surrounded by, by my count, 10 to 12 or more of these 17-year-old men who were ready to go at it.
Yeah, they were pumped. as far as the MAGA hats and things like that, I'm around high school kids quite a bit, and I see the ones who wear the MAGA hats, and it's their brand. It's their call to arms. It's who they are, and they are ready to throw down about the politics. It's ready, and it's the same kids who wear the LGBTQT outfits every day. It's their brand. They are socially aware of who they are and politically aware of who they are on the opposite side of the spectrum. And they are acutely aware of what they are wearing and how it affects people. They will tell you, oh, it's just a hat, man. I don't know why it's triggering you. They know why it's triggering you, and that's why they are wearing it. And to be quite honest, I work in a very rural school, and the kids who wear their LGBTQ t-shirts, even the straight kids who wear the shirts that say straight but not narrow, and the colors and the pins, they know it triggers some of the kids who wear the MAGA hats. And this is the dance we play. Like,
boy, I'm a little uncomfortable with that equivalency, I gotta tell you.
They know what they're doing.
Well, no, what you're saying is they're engaging in a form of identity politics that they're expressing through their clothing, and that they are very strongly and emotionally aligned with the perspective that they are espousing through what they wear.
Yes.
And this is something that's typical of kids. It could be your Van Halen shirt and you're going to beat up the Bon Jovi fan. It could be
that's exactly
your sports team, but in this case, it's political ideologies that they've chosen.
It may be typical, but it's worse. And
right,
this
no,
is
it
something...
is absolutely worse, because you're fighting over Bon Jovi versus Van Halen.
Now, I'm not saying the
LGBT
kids. The LGBT kids don't fight. That's not their thing.
And they don't intimidate people, and they don't create those kinds of mobs. And that was the equivalency that I wasn't comfortable with.
This is where I'm going with it. The MAGA kids' identity is alpha, is we are pushing, and they are always there pushing, because they are just like, who does that remind you of? Their glorious leader, D. Trump. And that is where this is coming from. So they are all there pumped up wearing their MAGA hats, their MAGA wear, their MAGA jock straps, whatever. I'm telling you. Well, if you don't think they don't wear them, they do.
Well, with that in mind, we want to thank everybody for listening. Please follow us on Twitter at #MPUPodcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/MorePerfectUnionPodcast. And please share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us as well. And don't forget to check out Open Fire Politics, the Facebook group that we all hang out between shows. We're all there talking politics all week long, and we'd love to see you there too. Any last thoughts before we go?
Yeah, so this weekend I'm going to try to do more BuzzFeed quizzes. These are real BuzzFeed quizzes. What is your inner potato? Or I might do, which ousted Arab Spring ruler are you? So,
You're definitely Team Mubarak.